on PBS, and it was about World War II. And have some of you seen it? Pretty amazing thing. And, and I watched it and I thought to myself, it's amazing what the American people did during that period of time. I mean, we went across the Atlantic, we beat Hitler and the fascists, went across the Pacific, beat Japan, built the Pentagon, which is a huge building in Washington, just a little over a year. I mean, the accomplishments were absolutely amazing. And then I compared it to what I hear when I'm going around Iowa and around the country, because one of the things that I hear is people are worried that we're not going to leave our children a better life than we've had. And, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I was drilled into me from the time I was this big that if you're willing to work hard enough in this country, there was nothing you couldn't do. Nothing. And my parents believed to their soul that you could do, that I would have a better life than they've had. It was that simple. And I look at what's happening, and that's the great moral test for our generation. Are we going to leave our children a better life than we've had? It's not just politics. It's much bigger than that. And I look at what's happening today. Iraq, for example. I mean, we have men and women who've been amazing in their service for this country in Iraq. But we can't get the lights on in Baghdad. And then we had the hurricane hit New Orleans, and we've had Americans respond amazingly. I mean, volunteering, contributing, taking families into their community, all great things. But because the government's been such a mess, thousands of people don't have a home, they don't have a place to go back to, they don't have schools to send their kids to. Less than half the schools have reopened. We had September 11th, 6 years ago, and firefighters were extraordinarily courageous, going up into buildings when people were coming down in buildings. Great American heroes. But that ground zero is still a hole in New York. And the question is, why? Why is that true? And it is some incompetence. There's no doubt about that. But I think we need to go the next step and be honest about this. I think it's also corruption. And I think there is a corruption out there that infects what's happening in our government. And I think we need to be honest about that. I mean, you see it. And by the way, I don't think this corruption is certainly President Bush's administration. But I don't think it started with Bush. I think it's been going on for 25 plus years. And what you see happening, I mean, billions of dollars of no-bid contracts for Halliburton and other people in Iraq. Our men and women putting their lives on the line in Iraq. At the same time, we got these paid mercenaries moving around over there, getting paid Blackwater and others, getting paid 10 times as much as the men and women who wear the uniform of America. We got men and women dying and putting their lives on the line in Iraq, and people who are politically connected in America are making millions of dollars on this war. We got CEOs running companies into bankruptcy, really, and they get $1 million, multi-million-dollar golden parachute, and the people who work for this company for decades lose their pensions. We got a trade that costs us millions of jobs, and what do we get in return? We get a bunch of dangerous toys that we have to take away from our children, right? I mean, that's what's going on. We're trying to protect the American people, and the biggest company in America, Walmart, lobbies the Congress against inspecting cargo that's coming into the United States. And then we got these hedge fund managers, people making hundreds of millions of dollars, who are not paying their fair share of taxes. They're taking advantage of big tax loopholes. And the Congress says, oh, we're going to do something about it. And then along comes the lobbyists for the hedge funds, and now the Congress says they're not going to do anything about this Congress. I mean, what is wrong with this picture? See, here's what I think. I think the American people are just as amazing today as they were during World War II. I mean, the American people have been strong and courageous the entire time. But the government has become corrupt. That's what's happening. And, and I guess we could all say, this is all okay. The system's all just fine. And it's okay for politicians to take all this money from lobbyists. That's all right. And, you know, next time we have an election, maybe the Democrats will win and we'll replace corporate Republicans with corporate Democrats. You all know the way these lobbying firms work. I've seen it up close. It's not a pretty sight. I mean, they got big lobby. Let's say you're ExxonMobil. You hire the biggest lobbying firm in Washington. This is what you get. When the Republicans are in power, you got a crowd of Republican lobbyists who lobby the Congress. When the Democrats are in power, the Democratic lobbyists lobby the Congress. They're working for the same people. They're working for the biggest corporations in America. We have to do something about this. And we can do something about this. I mean, I'll just tell you, I've never taken money from Washington lobbyists. I'm proud of that. But this is not about me. This is about making this system work for all of us in a way that's fair and just and democratic, not the way it works now. And I'll give you an example of what you can do. You want to know what you can do? I'll tell you something you can do. If caucus goers in Iowa said, we will not caucus for a politician who's taking millions of dollars from Washington lobbyists, they'd stop. I mean, really. And it wouldn't just be the presidential candidates that stop. That whole crowd in Washington that's awash with that money, they'd stop too. I mean, the message would be loud and clear. And why does it matter? I mean, is this all just about a process? It doesn't really make any difference. It affects everything. Everything. Let's start with a simple example. Health care. I mean, nobody can really think our health care system works. I mean, we got 47 million people without coverage. We got 2 million more than we had a year ago. Health insurance premiums up 100%. I mean, it's dysfunctional. So why don't we have universal health care?
Money.
I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Thank you for bringing that up. And the lobbyists, that's exactly right. Drug companies, insurance companies, and their lobbyists. And the members of Congress already have health care. That's what you just said up here. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. But the question is, what are we going to do about it? We can't have, I met a man, some of you may have heard me tell this story because it happened several months ago, but I met a man in Western Virginia in the Appalachian Mountains, James Lowe. He was 51 years old, 3 years younger than me. I'm 54. And he told me about being born with a cleft palate. Because he had a cleft palate, he couldn't speak. And it was completely fixable. And he didn't have no health care coverage, so he couldn't fix it. Finally, somebody volunteered to fix it for him, and he was very grateful. Here's the problem. They fixed it when he was 50 years old. He lived for 5 decades in America, not able to speak, because he had no health care coverage. And he was all very grateful and kind. That's not how I felt. I thought, when are we going to do something about this? When are we going to are we going to keep letting drug companies and insurance companies run this country? I mean, when are we going to take our government back for America? Now, what do we need to do? Let me go to the question that was raised here just a minute ago. Here's what I want to do. When I'm sworn in as President of the United States, January of 2009, I want to say to members of Congress and to members of my administration, including my cabinet, I'm glad that you have health care coverage. I think it's a great thing that you and your family have health care coverage. But what I want you to know, as your president, if you don't pass universal health care by July of this year, I will use my power to take your health care away from you. Because those people work for you. You pay their salary. You're paying for their health care. I want them to explain to you why they're entitled to get health care when America doesn't have health care. It's not right. It's not right. And we can put the heat on it. And we ought to put the heat on it. And the things we ought to be doing about health care, by the way, we ought to be mandating coverage for everybody, required by law. We ought to get rid of things like pre-existing conditions. They ought to be outlawed as a matter of law. Everybody required to be covered. We ought to treat mental health the same as physical health, mental health parity. We ought to cover preventive care, chronic care, long-term care, which many of our families are going through. My Elizabeth's parents are going through it right now. It is bad enough to have to figure out what to do with your parents or your family members without having to worry whether it's going to bankrupt the family to do it. On top of that, we need to cover dental care, vision care, and you've got to be able to take your health care with you wherever you go. In other words,